Good afternoon, everybody. You're very welcome to our webinar this afternoon on when a health and safety inspector calls. We're just going to turn the sound down on our side. Just bear with us 1 second. Okay. Just before we start, some housekeeping. If anybody has issues with sound, could they just notify the moderator? Gillian O'Keefe will be moderating today. But for everybody else who can hear, just put your hand up now. Just let us know you can hear this okay. We're going to spend the next 20-25 minutes going through the slides. After that, and during the presentation, you can send in questions, and we'll put together a fact sheet which will circulate next week. The agenda today will be covering health and safety law, the powers of inspectors, the reason for an inspection, and the actions of the inspector when they arrive at the premises. Just for abbreviation purposes, to speed through the next 25 minutes, I've summarised OHS is Occupational Health and Safety, the HSA is the Health and Safety Authority, SHWW, you'll see it in the text, is the Safety, Health and Welfare at Work Act. And the Act, if I say it, it's that 2005 Act. Start off with the law. So what are the legislative powers for inspectors? And they can operate under three pieces of legislation. The primary piece of legislation they will work under is the Safety, Health and Welfare at Work Act 2005. And there's specific sections of that setting out what they can do in a workplace. But they can also inspect a premises under the Chemicals Act of 2008. And finally, under the Carriage of Dangerous Goods by Road and Use of Transportable Pressure Equipment regs that are from 2011 to 2017. So those three pieces of legislation, for most of you, however, it's going to be the Safety, Health and Welfare at Work Act that you're going to work with. I think it's important to step back and to talk about what is the role of the Health and Safety Authority. So the Health and Safety Authority are responsible for inspection of all places of work and monitoring of compliance with health and safety laws. They also, though, promote good standards of health and safety at work. They investigate serious accidents, causes of ill health and complaints. They undertake and sponsor research on health and safety at work. They develop and publish codes of practice, guidance and information documents, which you, I'm sure, regularly avail of on the HSA website. They provide an information service during office hours. And finally, they develop new laws and standards on health and safety at work. The powers of the inspectors then when they arrive on the premises, and this is what we get a lot of queries on. First of all, it's the right discussion around the right of entry into any workplace. They can search, they have the right, and they can search and examine the place of work or any process or procedure carried out at that workplace. So it's the equivalent of a member of An Garda Síochána coming on site and wanting to look at the workplace. They can request that any work process, machinery, equipment, or substance is left undisturbed. They can request any records that they require, and they require any person at that workplace to provide information. So that's why it's important to know what type of information they could seek out while they're at the workplace. They can also require that any machine or process is operated. So we do have people who obstruct this from time to time, but it is in the best interests of any employer to make sure that you cooperate with the inspector when they're on site. They can question any person for information. So they may stop an inspection midway and talk to somebody who's operating a piece of equipment or somebody who's on break and ask them any information they like about the workplace. They can take measurements, they can take photographs, video recordings, or any other information that they want. They can require an article they consider to be a risk to be dismantled or tested further. So that's usually a piece of equipment. And they can ask a person they consider that may have committed an offence to provide their name and address to the inspector. So under the Chemicals Act then, they have slightly different responsibilities and authorities. So they can inspect any workplace where chemicals might be present. And some of you may have chemicals in small quantities. It's unlikely they would inspect under this piece of legislation, but it's possible. They can inspect any other place, for example, an office or a database where he or she can check records on chemicals. So that might be not be the place where the chemicals are stored, but where the records are stored. They can remove and retain chemicals under this Act, and they can require the removal of a chemical from the market. And then finally, they can require the safe disposal of a chemical which prevents it being marketed, so where it's not licensed. And then finally, under the transport of dangerous goods by road regulations, they have other responsibilities and powers. So the driver of the vehicle who is being inspected may be required to present the appropriate documentation of the vehicle, or they may be asked to refer to where the documentation is available back at the vehicle's base. They can follow up inspection at the base, and they can ask for any written records, reports, fixed penalty or other enforcement notices will be given to the driver and copied to the duty holder's registered office. So that's on the day of the inspection. And it's important to notify anybody who's on the road and carrying dangerous goods that this is something that may happen. The reasons for an inspection. And just before we start this, the number one reason that people think they will be inspected is because they report an accident, and that is not the case. Unless it's a very serious accident or a fatality, it's not the reason typically for an inspection. So these are the reasons. Firstly, it's a routine inspection. Secondly, it can be part of an inspection campaign. Thirdly, it could be an investigation, as I said, of an accident or a dangerous occurrence that's been reported. It could be to investigate a complaint, and that could be a complaint made by an employee or a member of the public. And it could be to investigate a workplace fatality. So they're the reasons for an inspection. I'll go through each of these in detail. Firstly, the routine inspection, monitor compliance with the Act and other relevant legislation. So they can visit a workplace at any reasonable time, and that's important, the reasonable. So generally within normal working hours, unless the business operates typically outside of those hours. And they will ask for a person in charge. So obviously they will come into reception and ask for who's in charge. And as most of the businesses here are small businesses, it'll be the first person they meet when they come onto the premises. They request that you inform the safety representative of their presence. That may be the same person, but if there's a separate safety representative, they must be informed. They can ask about the business. So talk about, how the business is doing, what's the operation of the business, how many people work there, etc. They will probably inform you how they wish to proceed with the inspection. As we're talking about small workplaces, this will be done very briefly. And as they go, they will highlight any faults that are noted during the inspection. So that's the routine inspection. Part of that, they will look at documents. The first and foremost, they will look at the safety statement, and they will ask you for a copy of it, or they'll ask to see it online. If you're using Be Smart, which is the safety statement tool that's available on the Health and Safety Authority website, they could ask to access that. And so everybody who's on premises that day should have the login details for that, or you should have a physical copy available for the inspector to review. They can ask for risk assessments associated with any task that's been carried out on site. They can ask for training records, maintenance records, the safety and health plan, etc. So be aware that that information should be readily accessible for anybody. And most likely you won't know that an inspection is about to take place. Secondly, it can be part of an inspection campaign. So it's worthwhile for every small business to look up the HSA website and to check what are the campaigns for the current year. And you'll know then whether your business is part of that campaign target, and then the likelihood would be that you would be included in the inspection campaign. It's published annually, it's online under hsa.ie, and it has a target number of inspections for each business or sector type. It includes areas that will be inspected and the rationale. So obviously, if there's a lot of accidents taking place within a particular sector, then that's likely to be included in the inspection campaign. Secondly, here's an example of a recent inspection campaign. So for last year, the detail that's available on the HSA website from 2017. In May, they were looking at tractors and machinery. They were also looking at work-related vehicle safety inspections and information around that. In June, it was construction inspection campaign based on occupational health. And in September, it was looking at chemicals and consumer products. And they launched a nationwide campaign targeted at discount and hardware stores. So the information hasn't been updated for 2018, but you keep an eye on the website and you'll see what's likely to be targeted again this year. This is the program of work for 2018, so it's obviously very focused if you look at the number of inspections on the two highest risk areas, which are construction and agriculture. And then as you go down, you'll see the different areas that you may or may not fit into. It's likely that if you're not in these particular areas that you won't be inspected. Thirdly, that's investigation of an accident or a dangerous occurrence. So this is why would they inspect? And this is the reason they would be looking at what has been reported through. Is it an unusual type of accident? Was there a lot of injuries as a result? Or was there a dangerous occurrence? And there you'd be referring back to the reporting of accidents and dangerous occurrence regulations 2016. If you have any questions on what should be reported, then you can send them through to us. They only result though in 5% of the accidents. So this is the number one reason why people think they're inspected, but it actually only results in 5%. And even in that 5%, it would be very serious accidents. So they focus on the accident in question, and they may request the following information. They would look at the accident investigation report, any photographs or drawings that you have in relation to that accident. They would ask for specific risk assessments and the general safety statement. They would ask for training records, maintenance checks, or any technical information relating to that accident. They would interview witnesses or other parties and take statements, and they would do a follow-up accordingly. So it's important to keep that information, but in terms of documentation and GDPR, you need to define how long you will keep the information. Anything that's reported to the Health and Safety Authority through the IR1 or IR3 form must be available for 10 years following the date of the report. So that's how long we'd recommend you keep the supporting information for the most part, just to support the accident report. Then moving on to investigating a complaint. So this is where employees are typically the people who make complaints against a company and it's reported to the Health and Safety Authority, but it could also be a member of the public. So once the complaint is received by the Health and Safety Authority, they will contact the company, and they usually do this formally through a letter. They detail the complaint and they seek more information. So it's up to the company then to write back and to answer or address the complaint that's been made. The letter from the Health and Safety Authority could be the first time the company is aware that a complaint has been made, and that's usually the case. So it's not the first time they've heard the issue, but they don't know that the complaint has been put forward to the Health and Safety Authority. The Health and Safety Authority normally give a timeline to respond, but it's not usually a very long timeline. It has to be done normally within a week. And then depending on the response and depending on whether they've got back in time, a follow-up visit may take place. So I would say if the Health and Safety Authority are dissatisfied with the response or feel like it's not fully been addressed, or if the delay has been, or if the response has been delayed, they would probably prioritise a follow-up visit. And then finally, investigating a fatality. So the Health and Safety investigates all work-related fatalities. An investigation is started as soon as possible and may involve inspectors attending on site, recording details at the scene of the accident. They take photos, measurements, documentation, and any CCTV footage that may be relevant. They also take statements from employees and members of the public, and they can examine any machinery or other items involved in the fatality. The scene of the accident must be left undisturbed for 3 days following a fatality until the inspector has completed their investigation. The actions of an inspector while they're on site and follow-up as well. So this is the type of follow-up that's expected from an inspector being on site. First of all, you could get verbal advice. This would be during the process of the tour of the site. You'll get a report of the inspection. You could get an improvement direction, and a plan is in response to the direction. You get an improvement notice, a prohibition notice, and finally an information notice. We'll go through those in a bit more detail. So the report of the inspection letter results are electronically recorded on the authority's GeoSmart information storage system. They'll provide you with a handwritten report of the inspection and which can be left on site. It's typically signed by the inspector and the employer or person in charge. A timeline is set out to action the items which will be agreed and detailed. The employer is required to complete the items within the time frame set and then report back to the inspector with the actions completed, including evidence to support that. And that could be in the form of documentation, photographs, etc. An improvement direction is a very common action from an inspection, and it's a notice from an inspector where he or she is of the opinion that an activity is likely to involve risk to health and safety, requiring submission of a plan specifying the remedial action to be taken. The plan is in response to the direction. So it's setting out the remedial action to be taken to comply with the direction, and it's either approved or rejected by the inspector in question. The notice then, it's from an inspector who's of the opinion that a person is contravening the statutory provisions or has failed to implement an improvement plan. So it's a step up from the plan or the direction. The notice shall specify the inspector's reasons and set out the measures to be taken. A person who's aggrieved by a notice may appeal to the district court within 14 days. The prohibition notice is where an inspector is of the opinion that an activity is likely to involve a risk of serious personal injury to a person. So this is only taken in very serious circumstances. The notice takes effect immediately from when the person on whom the notice is served receives the notice, and it's brought to the attention of anyone affected and displayed in a prominent place. So it must be put up in the workplace. The notice can be put up for a part of an activity on site, so it doesn't necessarily mean the workplace closes, but a part of it may cease to operate. With the prohibition notice, there is a right to appeal, and it's within 7 days, beginning on the day on which the notice was served, and appeals go to a judge of the district court in the district in which the notice was served. Here's an example of the appeals, the prosecutions for 2015, and all of the notices are published on the HSA website. So just as a point to note before we wrap up this section, less than 10% of inspections result in formal enforcement. 45% result in a formal written report of inspection handed out at the time of the inspection, and 45% are advisory in nature. So to prepare for an inspection, it's going to be very different for a large company compared to a smaller company. In a large company, you could have a team of people you assign in case an inspector calls. For a smaller company, it's going to be everybody on site is involved in the inspection and the follow-up. So what can be done in advance? I think it's important as a group, as part of a staff meeting, to just prepare for the fact that this could happen. So determine who may be required during the inspection and why. And in many small firms, it's going to be everybody, anybody's available on the day. But it makes it important to make sure that everybody's briefed. So brief individuals and the group. So go through this presentation, take aspects of it as you want to, and inform the groups of people who may be involved how they could be impacted by an inspection and what they should do. So they should ensure all documentation can be made available if and when required, and inform safety representatives or the safety rep of their right and contact them when the inspector arrives. I think the key thing there is telling people involved that it could happen at any time, and this is the protocol they should adopt. So when an inspector calls, invite them in, let them lead the way and be open and honest. You have free consultancy for the next hour, so ask them any questions you have about health and safety. Be engaged in the process and keep the lines of communication open, even after the inspection. Closeout meeting. So I think it's important when they come in and after the tour or after the review of the premises to have a closeout meeting. So invite anybody who's on site, including the most senior management, to attend this. So it should be held at the conclusion of the inspection. The most senior manager should be in attendance. The inspector may serve the enforcement notices on the employer or other duty holder at this meeting. An inspector also reviews with the senior manager their level of awareness of responsibility under the Act and the level of implementation of their manager responsibilities. So this is a key meeting in terms of understanding what the safety culture is on site. That's the end of the slides for today. I'm leaving you my contact details, and I know that you can contact the other members of the SFA, including Helen Quinn, in relation to any occupational health and safety questions. If you have questions on this particular webinar, please do not hesitate to send them in, and we will send the fact sheet out by the end of next week. Thank you for your time and attention, and look forward to talking to you again soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.